The sun was sinking below the fractured horizon, casting a fiery glow over the ruins of a world long dead. Rusted steel skeletons of skyscrapers reached toward the sky like the clawing fingers of some ancient beast, and the once bustling streets were now overrun by creeping vines and stillness. Gabriel trudged through this graveyard of humanity, his boots crunching against shards of broken glass and brittle asphalt. His pack, slung low on his shoulders, was filled with the meager spoils of the day, a few canned goods, a rusted flashlight, and an old, water-damaged book. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He paused at the edge of what had once been a park. The skeletal remains of playground equipment jutted from the earth, their cheerful colors long since bleached by time and despair. Gabriel stood there for a moment, his breath fogging in the cool air. His gaze lingered on the rusted swing set, swaying faintly in the breeze, as memories clawed their way to the surface. Children's laughter, the smell of freshly cut grass, the warmth of a life that no longer existed. He shook his head and moved on. There was no use dwelling on the past. Not here. Not anymore. The first sign came as a tremor, a faint vibration that Gabriel felt beneath his boots as he climbed over the rubble of a collapsed building. He froze, his survival instincts kicking in like a second heartbeat. For years, he had lived in a world where silence was law, where any unexpected sound or movement could mean danger. He crouched low, his hand tightening around the worn grip of his crowbar. The vibration grew stronger, accompanied by a low hum that seemed to pulse through the air. Gabriel's eyes darted to the sky, scanning the gray, cloud-streaked expanse for the source of the disturbance. At first there was nothing, only the oppressive stillness that had become his constant companion. Then he saw it. A light pierced the heavens, a brilliant, golden beam that split the clouds as though tearing apart a veil. It descended slowly, growing brighter and more defined as it neared the earth. Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. His first thought was of a missile, some long-forgotten weapon of humanity's self-destruction finally fulfilling its purpose. But as the light drew closer, its shape became clear. It was no missile, it was a ship. The vessel was unlike anything Gabriel had ever seen. Sleek and angular, it shimmered with a metallic sheen that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid under the dying light of the sun. Strange symbols, glowing faintly, adorned its surface, and its edges pulsed with a soft blue radiance. It hovered for a moment above the ground, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying, before descending gently onto the cracked asphalt of what had once been a city square. Gabriel's heart hammered in his chest as he crouched in the shadows of a crumbling wall. He didn't move, he didn't breathe. His mind raced with questions. Who or what had come to this desolate place? And why now? The ship's hull glowed faintly as a hatch slid open with a soft hiss, revealing an interior bathed in golden light. Figures emerged, their silhouettes framed by the otherworldly glow. They moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, their forms sleek and lithe, yet undeniably humanoid. As they stepped into the open, Gabriel's breath hitched. The beings were women, or at least they appeared to be. Their features were delicate and symmetrical, their skin a luminous shade of pale gold that seemed to shimmer as they moved. Their hair flowed like liquid silver, catching the light with an almost hypnotic quality, and intricate patterns glowed faintly along their arms and faces, like living tattoos. They wore garments that seemed to be woven from light itself, flowing and iridescent, shifting colors with every movement. Gabriel's first instinct was to flee. His years of solitude had taught him to trust no one, to avoid anything unknown. But something about the way they moved, cautious yet purposeful, their expressions tinged with a strange mix of reverence and sorrow, kept him rooted in place. He watched as one of the women, taller than the rest, and with an air of quiet authority, stepped forward. She raised a hand, palm outward, a gesture of peace. Her eyes, a deep and shimmering violet, searched the ruins as though seeking something or someone. Gabriel's chest tightened as her gaze passed over his hiding place. For a moment, he thought he had gone unnoticed, but then her head tilted slightly, and those violet eyes locked onto his. "Please," she said. The word was spoken in a voice that was soft yet resonant, carrying a musical quality that made it seem almost unreal. Gabriel blinked in shock. It was his language, his words. Yet it sounded strange on her tongue, as though shaped by an alien rhythm. Gabriel hesitated, his crowbar still clutched tightly in his hand. He could feel his pulse pounding in his ears, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a physical force. For years, he had been alone. For years, he had survived by trusting no one, relying only on himself. And now, before him stood beings who defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. He stepped forward. Slowly, cautiously, he emerged from the shadows, his posture tense and wary. The alien women turned to face him, their expressions shifting as they took in the sight of him. There was no fear in their eyes, only curiosity and something deeper, a glimmer of hope that seemed to radiate from them like light. The leader, the one who had spoken, took a step closer. She moved slowly, her hands still raised in a gesture of peace. When she spoke again, her voice was tinged with emotion, as though the weight of her words carried an entire world. "You are the one," she said. "The last. We have come for you." Gabriel's throat tightened, his mind reeling. The last. He had heard the phrase before, whispered in his darkest moments, echoing in his dreams. The last man. The final remnant of a dying world. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rough and strained from years of disuse. The leader's gaze softened. "To save us," she said simply. Gabriel's grip on his crowbar loosened. He didn't know what these beings wanted or why they had come to this ruined world. But in their eyes he saw something that he hadn't seen in years, something that stirred a long dormant part of him. Connection, purpose, hope. And for the first time in a very long time, Gabriel felt the faintest flicker of something he thought he had lost forever, the will to take a chance. Gabriel gripped the seat of the alien craft, his knuckles white against the strange, smooth material that seemed to hum faintly beneath his fingers. The interior of the vessel was as otherworldly as its occupants, walls that shimmered like liquid glass, consoles that pulsed with iridescent light, and surfaces that shifted texture under his touch. He felt as though he were inside a living organism rather than a machine. The air was cool and faintly scented, carrying a hint of something floral yet unfamiliar. Elena, the leader of the alien women, sat across from him. Her violet eyes, so impossibly deep they seemed to hold galaxies, remained fixed on him, a mixture of curiosity and reassurance in her gaze. Gabriel avoided meeting her eyes, his thoughts a whirlwind of unease and anticipation. For years, his world had been defined by desolation, silence, and survival. Now, he was hurtling toward the unknown at an impossible speed, leaving behind the ruins of Earth for a future he couldn't begin to imagine. "Are you comfortable?" Elena asked, her voice calm and melodic. She spoke in his language now, though her words carried an alien lilt, like a song with unfamiliar notes. Gabriel swallowed hard. "As comfortable as I can be, given the circumstances." Elena's lips curved into a small, understanding smile. "I know this must feel overwhelming, but you are safe with us. I promise." Gabriel nodded but said nothing. His survival instinct screamed at him to remain vigilant, to not trust these beings, no matter how gentle they seemed. Yet deep down, another part of him, one long buried beneath years of solitude, yearned to believe her. When the ship finally broke through the atmosphere of Illyria, Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. The view before him was nothing short of breathtaking. Illyria was a world of contrasts, a symphony of colors and textures that defied anything he had ever seen on Earth. The skies were a deep indigo, streaked with ribbons of shifting light that moved like liquid rainbows. Below, vast forests stretched across the land, their trees glowing faintly in hues of green, blue, and gold. Rivers wound through the terrain, their waters shimmering as if infused with starlight. In the distance, crystalline mountains jutted into the sky, their peaks catching and refracting the light like prisms. As the ship descended, Gabriel caught glimpses of the Illyrian cities, towering structures of translucent material that sparkled like gemstones. These cities seemed to grow organically from the land, their architecture blending seamlessly with the surrounding nature. Bridges of light spanned wide chasms, and vast gardens hung suspended in the air, their blossoms glowing softly in the twilight. "It's beautiful," Gabriel murmured, the words escaping him before he could stop them. Elena's gaze softened. "This is our home. and now it is yours as well." The ship landed smoothly on a raised platform that overlooked one of the cities. Gabriel's nerves tightened as the hatch opened, flooding the cabin with warm, fragrant air. He hesitated for a moment before stepping out, his boots touching alien soil for the first time. The Illyrians had gathered to greet him. Hundreds of them stood on the platform, their luminous forms creating a dazzling sea of light. As Gabriel stepped forward, an audible ripple passed through the crowd, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and whispers in their musical language. He felt exposed under their gaze, like a specimen under a microscope. The Illyrians' eyes, ranging from violet to emerald to sapphire, studied him intently, their expressions a blend of wonder and uncertainty. He resisted the urge to retreat, reminding himself that he had agreed to this, though he still wasn't sure why. Elena raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "This is Gabriel," she announced in her language, her voice carrying an authority that demanded attention. "The last man of Earth. He is our guest, our hope." The crowd murmured again, their luminous eyes flickering with emotion. Some appeared reverent, while others looked skeptical. Gabriel shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny, his pulse quickening. "They're staring at me like I'm some kind of miracle," he muttered to Elena. "You are," she replied simply, her tone devoid of irony. Gabriel was led through the city, accompanied by Elena and a smaller group of Illyrians. The streets were wide and paved with a material that seemed to emit a faint glow, illuminating their path without any visible source of light. Towers of translucent crystal rose on either side, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that shimmered in the light. Bridges spanned the air above, connecting the towers and creating layers of walkways teeming with activity. The Illyrians moved gracefully through the city, their garments flowing like water and catching the ambient light. Everywhere Gabriel looked, he saw beauty and precision, a society that seemed to have perfected the balance between technology and nature. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a sense of melancholy, an absence that he couldn't quite place. "Where are the men?" Gabriel asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Elena paused, her expression briefly shadowed by sorrow. "Gone," she said softly. "A plague swept through our species many years ago, targeting only the males. We fought to save them, but her voice faltered, and she looked away. We were too late." Gabriel felt a pang of sympathy, despite himself. He understood loss perhaps too well. "And now you think I can help," he said, his tone guarded. Elena met his gaze, her violet eyes filled with both hope and an unspoken weight. "We don't know, but we had to try." Gabriel was taken to a dwelling prepared for him, a structure that mirrored the Illyrians' aesthetic, a seamless blend of elegance and functionality. The interior was spacious yet minimalistic, with walls that shifted color at a touch and furniture that seemed to mold itself to his needs. A small garden of bioluminescent plants grew in one corner, casting a soothing glow. Elena left him with a guide, Kalis, a younger Illyrian with an inquisitive demeanor. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she showed him around, explaining the functions of the dwelling and answering his questions with patience. As the day turned to night, Gabriel found himself sitting alone in the garden, staring up at the alien sky. The stars were different here, their constellations unfamiliar, yet they held a beauty that felt strangely comforting. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone, and yet he had never felt more isolated. In the days that followed, Gabriel began to explore Illyria under Kalis's guidance. He learned about their advanced technology machines that could heal wounds in seconds, energy sources that seemed to defy the laws of physics, and methods of communication that made words almost unnecessary. He marveled at their artistry, their culture, their resilience. Yet he also felt the weight of their expectations. Everywhere he went, the Illyrians watched him, their eyes filled with hope and uncertainty. He was the last man, a relic of a world they had never known, a potential savior for a society on the brink. Gabriel wasn't sure if he could live up to their hopes. But as he stood on a balcony overlooking the shimmering city, the wind carrying the faint hum of Illyria's energy, he realized he didn't have much of a choice. This was his reality now, and for better or worse, he would have to find a way to navigate it. The days on Illyria unfolded in a haze of discovery, tension, and moments of quiet reflection for Gabriel. The initial awe he felt upon stepping into this alien world had begun to subside, replaced by an uneasy awareness of the role he was expected to play. The Illyrians treated him with a mixture of reverence and curiosity, as though he were a living artifact from a bygone era. But the weight of their hope bore down on him, and no amount of dazzling landscapes or miraculous technology could erase the gnawing doubt in his mind. Could he truly help them? The days passed slowly at first. Then, as Gabriel began to venture deeper into Illyrian society, time seemed to accelerate, the hours blurring into one another in a stream of cultural exchanges, scientific discussions, and personal connections that forced him to confront not only their alien world but also his place within it. Gabriel's morning began with Kaylee's arriving at his dwelling, her steps light and deliberate as she entered the main chamber. Kaylee's had become something of a liaison for him, a translator, guide, and occasional confidant. Though her youthful curiosity often bordered on invasive, Gabriel found her enthusiasm infectious. "Are you ready for today's session?" she asked, her voice carrying that faint melodic quality unique to the Illyrians. Her hair, shimmering like strands of silver thread, swayed as she spoke. Gabriel rubbed his temples and sighed. "What is it this time? Another lecture about your history, or more of those experiments?" Kaylee's tilted her head, the faint glow of her intricate facial markings intensifying. "Neither. Today you're meeting Elena to discuss the psychological integration program. It's about understanding how our species can adapt to each other, bridging the gap, as she says." Gabriel snorted softly. "Bridging the gap, huh? Feels more like I'm the one building the bridge while everyone else watches from the shore." Kaylee's laughed, a light, tinkling sound. "That may be true. But you're doing better than you think." The integration program meeting was held in the upper reaches of a crystalline tower overlooking the city. Elena greeted Gabriel warmly, her presence as serene and commanding as ever. She wore a flowing garment of iridescent hues, the shifting colors reflecting the light streaming in through the tower's translucent walls. As Gabriel took his seat, a familiar figure entered the room: Zarina, one of the council members who had voiced her skepticism about Gabriel's presence since his arrival. Zarina's angular features and piercing emerald eyes seemed to carry the weight of every unspoken critique she had ever harbored. Elena gestured for silence as the room filled with murmurs. "We're here to address the growing concerns within our society regarding Gabriel's role and to find ways to deepen our mutual understanding." Gabriel straightened in his seat, feeling Zarina's gaze fixed on him like a blade. Zarina spoke first, her tone clipped. "Elena, while I respect your leadership, I must question whether this integration is truly viable. Gabriel is not one of us. He does not share our physiology, our culture, or our burdens. How can he possibly understand what we need?" Gabriel's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting Elena respond. Elena's voice was calm but firm. "It is precisely because he is different that he holds value. Gabriel represents a perspective we lack. He has survived where others could not. His resilience, his insight, these are qualities we must learn from if we are to adapt and thrive." Zarina folded her arms, unconvinced. "And what if his differences create more problems than solutions? We are putting too much faith in an unknown variable." Gabriel couldn't hold back any longer. "I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice steady but edged with frustration. "I didn't ask to be your hope, but I'm here, and I'm doing the best I can. Maybe instead of treating me like some kind of alien relic, you could try seeing me for what I am, someone trying to help." The room fell silent. Zarina's expression hardened, but Elena's gaze softened, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. After the meeting, Elena approached Gabriel on a balcony overlooking the city. The two stood in silence for a moment, the faint hum of Illyria's energy fields filling the air. "You handled yourself well," Elena said finally. Gabriel let out a humorless laugh. "If by well you mean I didn't throw something at Zarina, then sure." Elena chuckled softly. "Zarina's skepticism comes from a place of fear. She has seen our people suffer unimaginable loss. Trust does not come easily to her, or to many of us." Gabriel turned to face her, his expression serious. "And you? Why do you trust me?" Elena met his gaze, her violet eyes shimmering. "Because I see something in you that many of my people cannot. You remind me of what we lost and what we might gain." Gabriel's chest tightened at her words. He wasn't sure if it was admiration, gratitude, or something deeper. But in that moment, he felt a connection that transcended words. Cultural exchange. In the weeks that followed, Gabriel and the Illyrians engaged in an exchange of knowledge. He shared fragments of Earth's history, stories of humanity's resilience, and even rudimentary engineering concepts that intrigued their scientists. In return, the Illyrians taught him about their world. They explained how their society had adapted to the loss of its male population, how their advanced technology had prolonged their survival, and how their culture had evolved into one of collaboration and empathy. Gabriel spent hours working alongside Illyrian biologists, learning about their physiology and the challenges they faced. The more he understood, the more he realized the magnitude of their plight. Their survival wasn't just about reproduction, it was about preserving an entire way of life. Through it all, Gabriel's relationship with Elena deepened. They often found themselves alone, sharing quiet conversations about their respective worlds. Elena's wisdom and compassion were a balm to Gabriel's raw, lonely soul, and her presence gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. One evening, as they sat beneath the glowing canopy of an Illyrian forest, Elena asked him, "Do you miss your home?" Gabriel stared into the luminous foliage above them, his thoughts heavy. "I miss what it used to be, but that place is gone. There's nothing left for me there." Elena placed a hand on his, her touch light and warm. "Perhaps this can be your home now." Gabriel turned to her, the faint glow of the forest reflecting in her violet eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that it might be possible. Rising tensions. But not everyone shared their bond or optimism. Zarina's faction grew bolder, their whispers of dissent spreading through Illyrian society. Some began to question whether Gabriel's presence was worth the risk, while others feared that his influence could destabilize their fragile balance. The tension came to a head one night when Gabriel's dwelling was vandalized. Strange symbols were scrawled across the walls, their meaning unclear but their intent unmistakable. Gabriel stared at the markings, a cold knot of anger tightening in his chest. Elena arrived moments later, her expression grim. "I'll handle this," she promised. Gabriel shook his head. "No, I need to show them I'm not just some outsider to be feared. I need to prove I'm worth trusting." Elena studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let's do it together." As the days turned into weeks, Gabriel began to see a shift. Slowly, cautiously, some of the Illyrians began to warm to him. He worked alongside them, not as a savior but as a partner, learning their ways while sharing his own. And though the divide between their worlds was vast, the first fragile strands of a bridge began to form. The weeks that followed the vandalism of Gabriel's dwelling were tense, but they also marked a turning point. He had resolved to show the Illyrians that he was more than an outsider, more than a fragile thread of hope for their survival. His days became a flurry of activity as he worked to prove his worth not by fulfilling some preordained destiny, but by integrating into their society and contributing where he could. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Breakthroughs and frustrations. Gabriel's mornings often began in the Illyrian biolaboratories, where the faint hum of energy conduits and the glowing walls created an otherworldly yet calming atmosphere. He had developed a cautious respect for the Illyrian scientists, who approached their work with a mix of precision and artistry. They reminded him of humanity's best minds, driven, curious, and determined. Today, he stood with a team of biologists around a translucent table that projected a holographic image of Illyrian DNA. The glowing strands shifted and rotated in the air, their patterns intricate and mesmerizing. "This," said Kales, gesturing to a segment of the hologram, "is the primary obstacle. Our genetic material has been altered by generations of adaptation to a male-less society. Traditional reproduction is no longer viable." Gabriel furrowed his brow, his mind racing to grasp the implications. "But you've survived this long. How?" Kales nodded. "Cloning. Genetic manipulation. Artificial gestation. But these methods are unsustainable. Each generation grows weaker, more prone to complications. He glanced at Elena, who stood nearby, her expression contemplative. "And you think my DNA can help?" Elena stepped forward, her voice calm yet resolute. "It's not just your DNA, Gabriel. It's your resilience, your adaptability. You've survived on a planet that tried to destroy you. We believe that incorporating even a fraction of your genetic material could stabilize our species." Gabriel's stomach tightened. He felt like a specimen under a microscope, a tool rather than a person. And if it doesn't work? Elena's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "Then we will have tried. That's all we can do." The sincerity in her voice struck a chord in Gabriel, but it also deepened the weight pressing down on him. These people weren't just asking for his help, they were staking their survival on him. While Gabriel's work with the scientists gained traction, tensions in the broader Illyrian society began to escalate. Zarina's faction, emboldened by growing support, began staging subtle acts of defiance. Meetings became more contentious, with debates over Gabriel's role turning into heated arguments. One evening, Gabriel attended a council meeting at Elena's behest. The room, an amphitheater carved from glowing crystal, was filled with Illyrian leaders, their luminous forms casting shifting shadows on the walls. Elena sat at the head of the chamber, her presence commanding yet serene. Zarina rose to speak, her tone sharp. "We have placed all our hopes on an outsider one, whose presence disrupts the delicate balance we've maintained for generations. How can we be sure his influence won't do more harm than good?" Gabriel clenched his fists, but remained silent, waiting for Elena to respond. Elena's voice was measured, but there was steel beneath it. "Zarina, fear is natural in times of change. But Gabriel has shown us that he is willing to work with us, to understand us. Change is never without risk, but stagnation is a far greater danger." Zarina's emerald eyes narrowed. "And what happens if he fails? If his presence weakens us further? Will you take responsibility for the collapse of our society?" The room buzzed with murmurs. Gabriel felt the weight of every gaze on him, their expectations and doubts like a physical force. He stood abruptly, his voice cutting through the noise. "I'm not here to destroy your society. I'm here because you asked me to be. I didn't ask for this responsibility, but I'm doing everything I can to help. Maybe you should ask yourselves if you're willing to do the same." The room fell silent, and for a moment, Gabriel thought he saw a flicker of respect in Zarina's expression before she sat down. The constant scrutiny and rising tensions took a toll on Gabriel, but they also forced him to confront his own limits and fears. Elena, sensing his struggle, began spending more time with him, offering both guidance and companionship. One evening, she invited him to a secluded glade on the outskirts of the city. The forest around them glowed softly, the bioluminescent plants casting a gentle light that danced on the surface of a nearby stream. "You're carrying so much," Elena said, her voice quiet. "I can see it in your eyes." Gabriel stared at the water, his reflection fragmented by ripples. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be humanity's last survivor or whatever I am to your people." Elena placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and grounding. "You're more than a survivor, Gabriel. You're a bridge, and bridges are not built without strain." He turned to her, his voice raw. "What if I'm not enough? What if I fail?" Elena's violet eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "You are enough, not because you are perfect, but because you are trying. That is all anyone can ask." The simplicity of her words struck him like a physical blow, and for the first time in years, Gabriel allowed himself to feel something other than fear and doubt. He felt seen. He felt understood. The fragile peace between Gabriel and the Illyrian factions shattered when an experiment involving his DNA went awry. A small but vocal group of Zarina's supporters sabotaged a crucial step in the process, leading to a minor but alarming biological reaction in one of the test samples. The incident ignited a firestorm of blame and accusations. Zarina's faction demanded Gabriel's immediate removal, while Elena and her allies defended his role, insisting the sabotage was the true culprit. Gabriel, caught in the middle, felt the full weight of their expectations pressing down on him. He spent the night pacing in his dwelling, his mind racing with thoughts of failure and escape. The next morning, Elena arrived unannounced. Her expression was a mix of exhaustion and determination. "We need to address this head-on," she said. "Together." Gabriel hesitated, his resolve wavering. "What if I can't fix this?" Elena stepped closer, her voice firm. "You're not here to fix everything, Gabriel. You're here to try. And that is enough." The following day, Gabriel and Elena stood before the entire Illyrian council and a crowd of onlookers. The tension in the air was palpable, the crowd's glowing eyes fixed on them. Gabriel took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I'm not a miracle worker," he began. "I'm not here to save you with some magical solution. But I am here to work with you, to learn from you, and to find a way forward together. If you're willing to trust me, even just a little, then maybe we can figure this out." The crowd murmured, their expressions a mix of doubt and curiosity. Elena stepped forward, her voice ringing with quiet authority. "Gabriel has shown us that hope is not about guarantees. It is about the willingness to try, and that is something we cannot afford to lose." For a long moment the room was silent. Then, slowly, one by one, the Illyrians began to nod. Even Zarina, though reluctant, seemed to soften. That night, Gabriel sat on the balcony of his dwelling, the city's lights stretching out before him like a field of stars. Elena joined him, her presence a quiet comfort. "Do you think this will work?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena looked out at the city, her expression contemplative. "I don't know. But I do know that we have a chance now, a chance we didn't have before you came." Gabriel nodded, the weight of their shared uncertainty tempered by a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time, he began to believe that perhaps he could be more than a survivor. Perhaps he could be a bridge, a fragile but vital connection between two worlds. And perhaps, in that connection, there was hope. The Illyrian city gleamed under an indigo sky streaked with shimmering auroras, but the beauty of the alien landscape was a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within its society. The tension that had simmered beneath the surface for weeks was reaching a breaking point, threatening to unravel the fragile progress Gabriel had made since his arrival. The sabotage incident had shaken the Illyrians' trust, and Zarina's faction had grown bolder in their dissent. Gabriel stood at the edge of the crystalline balcony in his dwelling, looking out over the glowing city. The soft hum of Illyria's energy fields filled the air, but the sound, once soothing, now felt oppressive. His shoulders sagged under the weight of expectation and doubt. For all his efforts, he felt as though he were standing on quicksand, sinking despite his struggle to stay afloat. The soft chime of the doorway interrupted his thoughts. When Gabriel turned, he saw Elena standing in the threshold, her violet eyes shadowed with worry but resolute. "We need to talk," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "There's been another incident." The incident was far graver than the previous act of sabotage. A critical system in one of Illyria's primary energy conduits had been damaged, triggering a chain reaction that threatened to destabilize the entire city's power grid. Without power, the delicate balance that sustained Illyrian society, its advanced technology, its artificial gestation systems, its very survival would collapse. Gabriel and Elena arrived at the central control hub, a vast chamber that pulsed with light and energy. Holographic displays hovered in the air, showing intricate schematics of the city's infrastructure. A team of Illyrian engineers worked frantically, their movements precise yet tinged with panic. "What happened?" Gabriel asked, scanning the room. Kaylee stepped forward, her usually bright demeanor replaced with grim determination. "It wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately compromised the energy matrix. If we don't stabilize it within the next few hours, the overload will spread to the other conduits. The entire city could be plunged into chaos." Gabriel's stomach churned. "Do we know who's responsible?" Elena's expression darkened. "Zarina's faction. We intercepted a transmission linking them to the sabotage. They believe this will force us to abandon our reliance on you and focus inward." Gabriel felt a surge of anger. They'd risk destroying their own city just to prove a point. They believe they're protecting it, Alina said quietly. Fear makes people irrational. Gabriel clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. How do we stop this? Kayleigh pointed to the holographic display. We need to recalibrate the damaged matrix manually. But the main access point is deep within the city's core, a dangerous area even under normal circumstances. The energy surges are highly unstable. One wrong move and... We don't have a choice, Gabriel interrupted. Tell me what I need to do. Gabriel's journey into the city's core was unlike anything he had experienced. Guided by Kayleigh's voice through a communicator, he navigated a labyrinth of glowing conduits and humming machinery, the air thick with heat and the faint metallic tang of ionized particles. The deeper he went, the more unstable the environment became. Energy pulses surged through the conduits, illuminating the narrow passageways with bursts of blinding light. Alina insisted on accompanying him, despite his protests. This is my city, Gabriel. My people. I won't let you face this alone. As they descended, Alina's presence became a source of reassurance for Gabriel. Her calm demeanor steadied his nerves, even as the walls around them trembled with the force of the surges. The hum of the energy fields grew louder, almost deafening, as they approached the damaged matrix. When they reached the core, Gabriel stopped short, momentarily overwhelmed by the sight. The energy matrix was a massive, pulsating structure, its crystalline surface fractured and sparking. Streams of raw energy arched through the air, the temperature rising with every pulse. It looked alive, a wounded beast thrashing in pain. This is it, Kayleigh's voice crackled through the communicator. The control panel is on the other side. You'll need to recalibrate the flow manually. Alina, you'll have to stabilize the conduits from the auxiliary terminal nearby. Gabriel nodded, sweat dripping down his face as he moved toward the control panel. Alina took her position at the terminal, her fingers gliding over the glowing interface with practiced precision. Be careful, she said, her voice steady but laced with concern. Gabriel reached the control panel, his hands hovering over the alien interface. Kayleigh guided him step by step, her instructions precise but difficult to follow. The system was unlike anything he had ever encountered, a blend of technology and organic components that required both logic and intuition to manipulate. As he worked, the energy surges grew more intense. The ground shook beneath his feet, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. Gabriel's heart pounded as he struggled to keep his focus. I can't hold it much longer, Alina shouted, her voice strained. Just a little more, Kayleigh urged. You're almost there, Gabriel. With a final adjustment, Gabriel entered the last command. The matrix shuddered violently, then fell silent. For a moment the chamber was bathed in darkness, the absence of light and sound almost as overwhelming as the chaos had been. Then, slowly, the matrix began to stabilize. The fractured structure repaired itself, its crystalline surface glowing once more with a steady, rhythmic pulse. It's working, Kayleigh's voice came through, filled with relief. The system is stabilizing. Gabriel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his legs nearly giving out beneath him. Alina stepped away from the terminal, her face damp with sweat but her expression triumphant. You did it, she said, her voice soft but filled with pride. We did it, Gabriel corrected, offering her a faint smile. The crisis marked a turning point for the Illyrians. The sabotage had nearly destroyed their city, but it also exposed the dangers of division. In the aftermath, Alina called for an emergency assembly, inviting both her supporters and Zarina's faction to address the growing rift. Gabriel stood beside Alina as she spoke to the assembled crowd, her voice resonating with quiet authority. This crisis has shown us how fragile our society has become, she said. We cannot afford to let fear and mistrust divide us. Gabriel came to us as an outsider, but he has proven time and again that he is willing to stand with us, to fight for our survival. It is time we do the same for him and for each other. Gabriel stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. I know I'm not one of you, and I know some of you still don't trust me, but I didn't come here to tear your society apart. I came because you asked for my help, and as long as you're willing to work with me, I'll keep trying. For a moment, the assembly was silent. Then, slowly, one by one, the Illyrians began to nod. Even Zarina, though reluctant, offered a curt nod of acknowledgement. In the days that followed, the Illyrians began to rebuild not just their damaged systems but their fractured unity. Gabriel continued his work with the scientists, his bond with Alina growing stronger with each passing day. The tensions that had once defined his presence in Illyria began to fade, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. One evening, as Gabriel and Alina stood on a balcony overlooking the city, she turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You've given us more than hope, Gabriel," she said. "You've given us a future." Gabriel looked out at the glowing city, a sense of quiet fulfillment settling over him. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged, not as a relic of a lost world, but as a part of something greater. Epilogue: the universal thread. The crisis had tested the Illyrians and Gabriel in ways none of them could have anticipated, but it also revealed a truth that transcended their differences. They were all bound by the same universal thread: the desire to survive, to connect, to build something lasting. As Gabriel stood under Illyria's indigo sky, the auroras dancing above him, he felt a spark of hope that he hadn't known in years. Together they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. And as the Illyrians worked to secure their future, Gabriel knew that, for the first time in his life, he had found his place in the universe. And that was enough.